Hello, I'm Cheryl Meyer, and I'm otherwise known as Cheryl M. Health Muse. And what my goal is to inspire you to lead a healthier life. So when I proposed my podcast, I proposed that we present it in two different segments. The first one is It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future Proof Your Health, where I get to share everything I have learned to return my health back to relative wellness and to live a pain-free life in spite of the fact that I have autoimmune disease. But the second part of my podcast is this episode, and that's Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. My concept with this is it's all fine and well that you hear me tell my story, but I get a lot of, it's all fine and well that it worked for you, but it's not going to work for me. And I wanted you to hear that there are lots of people out there that have made changes in their lifestyle that have supported their health and brought them back to relative wellness. We all have a couple things in common. We all owned our own health. Whatever the doctor was suggesting we did was going on a parallel path to us making these lifestyle changes where we did things that cleaned up our toxic load. We all pay attention to our body. You'll hear jazz in the background because I want you to listen to the rhythm of your health, and I want you to pay attention to what your body is telling you. My body had been trying to tell me that I was going to topple over into toxic load for some time. I just wasn't listening. So if you clean up your lifestyle and if you listen to your body, you have a very good chance not of being deprived in any way, but returning to feeling darn good. And that's what these podcasts are really all about. So thank you for joining me. This is going to be a Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in episode, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that we all inspire you to lead a healthier, happier life. Thank you. Hello, I am here today with a favorite person of mine that I have met on Facebook, Brandi Blouch. And I've invited her to tell me her story so that all of you can hear it, because she has an important story to get out there. And if anybody is dealing with bipolar, she is a perfect role model to tell you how she took ownership of her life and turned it around so that she could even out her emotions to live her life. She's also an author of a book, which I'll let her tell you all about. So Brandi, why don't you tell us what your history is and what your story is and why I've invited you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It is definitely an honor because I do adore you so much. So thank you for having me. So I am Brandi Blouch and I live with bipolar disorder. So growing up, I was a military brat. And that means that I had a military father. And we moved about every 3 years of my life. And when I was a little girl, it wasn't so bad, we're pretty flexible. But as we got into the teen years, it was much, much more difficult. So when my dad finally decided to retire, we were living in South Texas. And prior to that was Japan. So there's always been a huge culture shock anytime we've moved. And he decided he wanted to retire and he was looking for jobs and he found one in Guilford, Connecticut, of all places. I'm like, how did you find that? So he had gone ahead, of us. We were supposed to finish out the school year and then we were going to move early summer and he was gone to go find us a good school system, find us a good home. Well, I kept a journal at that time. And in the packing and the moving, well, my mother read it. So she read it and she read it and she had an earful, I'm sure. So she pulled me out of school, it was 10th grade, and brought me home. And I totally thought it was because she wanted help packing. That was totally her kind of jive. And she sat me down and she put my journal in front of me and said, how many times have you been drunk? And I sat there and thought, how many times did I write it in my book? Like, what am I claiming here? So I told as little as possible. She had already called my father, and this was like the middle of the week, and she said, okay, well, get packing. We're moving this weekend. You are not going back to school, and you are not going to see any of those friends. So that was shocking. So we packed up, and that weekend we drove from South Texas to Connecticut. And my dad was there waiting with a psychiatrist. So I go to this new school. I go, that's not very welcoming. I'm in a new environment. My parents now have my journal. And I've lined up a therapist. I've lined up a psychiatrist. And I think put me on medication right around then. 15, 16, which isn't recommended. It was Prozac. And anybody knows about Prozac. It's a tough psych med. And it made me hyper as hell, but nobody thought it was a big deal. So my mother also suffers from severe depression. And then my dad was an alcoholic. So it was a really great mixture. We were a screaming, yelling family. That's how we communicated. So moving to Connecticut, having to go through therapy, meds, I didn't obviously have much control of my own life. And they had put me into a psych ward, I think 2 different times before I graduated high school. And when I was in school, people were talking about, oh, Georgetown or music school in New York or this or that. I'm like, what is all that? Like, oh, well, we're going to college. I'm like, college? Like, what's college? We didn't talk about higher education in my family. My dad assumed wrongly that we would never make it, that we weren't smart enough, that we wouldn't follow through with it. And he doesn't have high opinions of us or other people. So when I heard people talking about college and they got to move away, I was like, oh, this is my way out. This is my way to go. So I figured out what it was. I figured out how I could get in. I finagled the college loans. Luckily, he was drunk. So when he was drunk, he signed the college loans. That's how we got them paid. Unfortunately, when you live in an environment that you learn to manipulate to get what you want. Because if you ask, the answer is always going to be no in that type of an environment. So I had my 4 years of college was all loans. I finished college.
What was your major?
Psychology, and I minored in rehab counseling.
Okay.
Kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, they do.
When I was studying abnormal psychology, they told us the first day, do not self-diagnose. And looking back, I'm like, well, if I had, maybe 10 years of my life would have been different. But nonetheless, and halfway through my college career, I was wanting to earn, my own money. So I had started working at a nightclub, and then I ended up going into an adult establishment, a strip club. I was like, okay, can I be a waitress? I think it was me just getting my feet wet. And they were like, oh no, you look too good to do that. You should really get on stage. And my audition really was to take my clothes off so they could see what I looked like. And they told me I needed to trim down my hair. I was like, yeah, that's what I was told. And I was like, okay, because I saw these beautiful girls on the stage. They looked gorgeous, all these lights and shiny stuff and all this money. I was like, yes, I want that. I know what I was getting into. So shortly thereafter, I started. And I did it for about 10 to 12 years. Little breaks in between.
And where was you with medication through all of this?
I hadn't been diagnosed yet.
So you were still on Prozac, or you weren't still on Prozac?
No, I quit Prozac my second hospitalization. They had me on such a high dosage. I couldn't think, I couldn't focus. And I said, forget it, I'm done. And I just went cold turkey. Whether that was a good idea or not, I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, no, you're supposed to go off of it very slowly, I think.
Very slowly, very slowly. So I had fired my therapist, quit taking meds, found out about college, took the hell off. And then when I found the adult industry, when I found strip clubs, I was like, it fed me. And I didn't know what it was feeding, but it fed me. I left Massachusetts, where I went to college, came back to Connecticut, where my parents were, for a short period of time. And then I was like, I'm going to New York. I'm going to be an actress. Just bye one day. And that's the spontaneity of the bipolar. So as you look and can kind of put pieces together, you can kind of see the illness forming, because symptoms of bipolar, one of them is that over sexuality. The strip club fed that over sexuality energy that I needed. And I was able to stay up super, super late, didn't need much sleep. It's also another bipolar symptom, not sleeping well, staying up to all hours of the night. And I did it. And it fed me. So I was coming upon the age of 30, so that would be 16 years ago. And I didn't want to do that anymore. I was like, I'm 30 years old. I can't keep doing this. I mean, physically I could have, but mentally, I don't want to do it anymore. I already sold my soul to the devil. I'm like, but I had no backup plan, Cheryl. I had no money in the bank. I had no real estate. I think I owned my car and that was it. I was getting eviction notices on my apartment. I wasn't paying my bills. Those are all also symptoms of bipolar. Not taking care of yourself, not taking care of, your common needs. So when I was trying to go through that and figure out, well, what's next? That's kind of where the stick cracked. That's where all this stuff came up. And I knew something was wrong. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was. So being in New York, I sought out all kinds of therapies. I went to an Indian masseuse healer. I went to 2 different naturopathic doctors. I went to a Chinese herbalist who gave me some raunchy tea. Didn't do anything. I went to 2 different talk therapists. I even did urine therapy. Okay. I didn't have Google like we have now. So I didn't obviously do it correctly. So I honestly took my urine, put it in the refrigerator, and I would drink some in the morning, thinking that was going to help. I do not advise it. That's really not the way it's supposed to be done. It's supposed to be broken down and broken down and broken down and broken down. It's not supposed to be a shot of urine. I was desperate. I was in an amazing acting class. I was starting to get acting gigs. I didn't want to lose that, but it was like everything was a mess all at once. And I didn't know how to take care of myself. So one of the therapists I saw gave me the book to read, An Unquiet Mind. And it's a story about a woman's experience and her life with bipolar. And she's a well-renowned physician in the area of mental health. And I cried through the book because I knew then exactly what I had. I identified with it all. So I found a neuropsychiatrist, something like that. He wasn't just a psychiatrist. And he's like, okay, well, we talked for like 2 hours. And he said, okay, well, you have bipolar 1 with PTSD and rapid cycling. And here's your prescription, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. It meant nothing to me. I didn't know what it was. I had a prescription that was so expensive that when I went to the pharmacy, like I would only buy like 2 tablets at a time because they were so expensive. And I was trying so hard to not go back to the strip club. And then I started to have side effects. I think within 2 weeks, I gained 10 pounds on that drug. I was like, this can't happen. I'm like, not doing this. So he changed the medication. And unfortunately, psychiatrists will change your medications very quickly. And you will experience all kinds of side effects. However, you don't know what caused that side effect because too many things are being changed at once. So ideally, if you ever are on a psych med and they want to change it, only allow them to change one at a time. Whether they increase it, whether they decrease it, and they want to add another one in, which is very common, you have to be preemptive for your own mental health. You have to know that it is okay to say, you know what, I only want to make one change at a time. So if it works or it doesn't, I know what the culprit was. Well, I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know you could stand up for yourself. I didn't know you could say no to a doctor. I've learned a lot. So in the mixture of that medication, I lost my mind. I was having a side effect to where I couldn't read. When I would read, the words, it was like an aphasia. There was no words. It wouldn't come out. Like I could see it, but I couldn't say it. And it just broke my heart. And I had to go work, because I had no money. So I had to make sure I could pay the bills. Still living in New York. I lived in New York. I actually worked in a club in Massachusetts. And I was driving all over the place. And I was driving really, really fast in my red Mustang. And that's also a symptom of bipolar. Feeling the need to have that rush, that fast energy that my muscle car fed me and gave me. And I drove around that one day, and I drove. I didn't want to go, and I didn't want to go home, but I needed the money. And I just drove and drove and drove and drove. And the change in the medication, I became so suicidal. Driving my car around, all I could think was, where's a bridge? I'm going to drive my car off a bridge. Some sanity must have come through, and I called my mother and I said, how long will they keep me if I did go to a hospital? And she said, Brandi, you need to go now. She goes, you need to call your father, because he was living in Connecticut. She was in Florida at the time. So I called them and I said, Dad, I think I need to go to the hospital. And he said, okay, well, where are you? I'm like, I don't know. I've been driving 4 hours. I don't know where I am. It just happened that I was two exits away from his apartment. Luckily, I met him there and he brought me to a psych hospital. And the fun began, so to say. When you go into a hospital and you see those doors that have locks on them, well, know that when you go back behind them, you're not coming out. They keep you. So they couldn't understand how I ended up there when I was living in New York. How did you end up here? I just explained I was driving and driving and driving. And when I arrived at the hospital, I was in what's called a mixed manic state. And a mixed manic state is when you're experiencing the high levels of energy of the mania coupled with the depths of the depression. It's a really scary place to be.
Had to be totally frightening.
Totally frightening. And I didn't trust my mind. I totally thought my mind had betrayed me. So they were trying, I had like a tank top on and some sweatpants or something. And they kept telling me they wanted me to change my clothes into those Johnnies. And I'm like, no. I think I fought with them for hours. And finally they're like, well, if you don't change, we're going to do it for you. But there was just something, I guess it was safe because it was the only thing that I knew was like my own shirt became so valuable. Crazy. So another psychiatrist came and took me to another room behind another locked door. And he asked me question after question after question. He asked me, how far is it between here and California? Really? And he asked me who the president was. I think I got that one right. And just question, well, how many sexual partners have you had? I'm like, was I supposed to keep track? But it was information for him. But to me, I'm like, what? What? So they were totally just lost. I don't think they had seen a case like that unless somebody had been psychotic. Hunted around, they find my psychiatrist in New York, and he had a drug plan planned out. If this drug didn't work, then we would try this drug. If this drug didn't work, try this drug. So they decided that we were going to keep that plan, but then they took me by ambulance to a different hospital that could hold me in the middle of Connecticut in Middletown. And I was there. I was in and out of there months. I was in for a week, I was out for a week or two, they went back in for a few weeks. I tried every psych drug there was, every concoction of psych drugs that they had. And I got to the point where they said that I was medication resistant. Like, okay, well, I've tried 23 of your psych drugs and now I'm resistant. And that's when shock treatments
Oh dear.
came onto the table. I knew of them because my mother had had them when I was in high school. So when they said, basically, this is really your only option, I said, oh, okay, then let's do it. You know, I just wanted to feel better. I just wanted to not want to kill myself. So once again, by ambulance, I was transported to yet another hospital that actually did the shock treatments. And I stayed there a month, and I had them 3 times a week. And then when I went home, they continued them outpatient. But I couldn't drive. Not like that. You know,
How
after,
did you feel after going through a shock treatment?
like, physically,
Yeah.
yeah, headache, bad headache. Because the actual shock treatment in and of itself is very quick. Like when I was in the hospital, because I was already there, I was normally the first person to have it done. There might have been 3 other people waiting. And where they did it was in the post-op room, like the post-surgery operating room. They had a corner off to the side, only shared by cloth curtains. And I would be first, and some days there were 3 people, some days there were 2 people. And I didn't realize what a blessing that kind of was in that situation. So I came out and they continued them. So I had to get a medical car to come pick me up, take me, and then pick me up at the hospital and bring me home. So I remember having them done when it was summer, and I also remember still having them done when there was tons of snow on the ground. So I figure within 6 months, I had about 23 or 24 of them. After when you get home, you have a massive headache. Usually you go to bed for a couple of days. You can't. You know, feeding myself was a chore. I honestly thought I would end up in a food kitchen because I didn't know how I was going to take care of myself.
Do you know what the point was of giving you shock treatments? What was it supposed to do for you?
Well, because they thought or said I was medication resistant, which meant I wasn't reacting or anyway to the medication. So they thought that usually it's used for depression. And I was probably still suicidal and depressed. So that's what they thought they were targeting. I mean, it was on both sides. Sometimes they'll just do one side. I got both. Ideally, and they kept asking me, well, how do you feel? And how is your depression? And are you still depressed? And if you were depressed still, they'd be, okay, we'll come on Wednesday and we'll do them again. Just like they're handing out lollipops. And it continued and continued. And somewhere along the line, I quit doing them. And it's weird because there's a big gap in time that I honestly have no memory of. And maybe that's a good thing. So my dad, you know, he picked me up and had moved me out of New York and moved me in with him. And my dad is great in the crisis, but once the crisis is over, he's like, okay, you've been here long enough, go. It's tough. So I think I had a boyfriend at the time that I lived with for a short period of time. My dad was taking me back and forth to my sister who lived in Maryland because he couldn't take care of me, so maybe she would be able to take care of me. Yeah, it didn't work very well. You know, I see pictures of Christmas during that time, and I'm like, how did I get there? Like, and who brought the fat girl to the party? Because I was like 50 pounds overweight. And they're like, oh, well, this was this and that. I have no memory. I don't have a memory of it. So all that, you know, it was just hospitals and doctors and forced therapy groups that I didn't get anything out of. And through it all, I stumbled across who's now my husband, Andy. We met by chance, slowly became best friends. And when I would have my treatments, he would come check on me, which was golden. I remember one morning he called and he said, Brandi, go to your front door. And I had shock treatment the day before. I said, I can't get up. No. And he said, just go to your front door. I'm like, why? And he just go to it. And I opened the front door and there were bags of groceries and orange juice and toilet paper. All the things like I didn't have. I really wasn't able to shop for myself. That was just such a blessing. He became such a blessing. And he was going through his own stuff. But he really stepped in and became my best friend. You know, I still had family now living all over the place. And at one point, I was still trying to work at night. And one night he said to me, Brandi, just stop. You don't have to do it anymore. He's like, I will help take care of you. Like, you can just stay here. We can move your stuff here. And that's it. And he had no expectations. Like, I didn't have to contribute for anything. I didn't have to go grocery shopping. I didn't have to clean. I didn't have to do dishes. I just had to exist. And that's really when the healing started, because I had a safe place. I had a safe person. And I felt safe, even though my head was still wonky. So after that, a little while, I think it was around 2007, I moved in here permanently. So maybe a year after, I finally found a really good psychiatrist. Diagnosis didn't change, but the medications changed. He said, you are over medicated. I was on one drug and I didn't know the side effects, but I was lactating and I wasn't pregnant and I've never had children. And it was a side effect to a medication. I didn't think to mention it because I didn't know it was a side effect of a medication, but it was. It was a side effect of a medication. He said, okay, we have to take you off that. I was like, why didn't anybody else tell me this or ask these questions? Like, he really went through all the different symptoms of the medications to see what I was experiencing and what. And then we changed me over to the medication that I'm still on today, which I'm lucky, I'm blessed. I'm still able to be on the same drug for 8 years. Often drugs get to a point where they don't work anymore, and then you have to do other ones. So, I take one drug for the depression, and then I take one drug for the bipolar. And the idea of a drug for bipolar is they're called mood stabilizers. And the way in which they're supposed to work is if you start to become manic, the idea is it's supposed to bring you back down. Or if you're depressed, it's supposed to bring you back up. A lot of times you'll have to do some type of a drug increase to get that going. So for me, when it's time to call the doctor, I end up in some type of a mixed state. I get really, really aggravated, really agitated. I feel like I can't handle what's going on. I start all kinds of projects, all kinds of things all over the place, and nothing gets touched after the first time it was touched. So I can kind of turn around and say, oh, there was a tornado through here. I'm not doing so good. So those are kind of indicators that, okay, things aren't going well. Let's call the doctor. And a lot of people, I don't believe they feel comfortable enough to call the doctor. It's like, that's their job. If you're paying them or you have insurance that's paying them, let them do their job. So, and also being able to identify what you're feeling, because some of these emotions and feelings, these aren't regular, normal emotions and feelings that we experience in our lifetime. So being able to articulate those and put those in verbiage that anybody can understand, that's almost half the struggle. Because what I think is, frustration, to the doctor, it could mean something different. Like, he has his idea what frustration is, but to me, so we've had to do a lot of communicating to really, he's like, well, you feel this or how you feel that. And fabulous. I mean, that is a good doctor. Not all psychiatrists are the same. And most psychiatrists, like any other physician, have their drugs of choice. So you could be on all kinds of different medications, and then when you get to this doctor, oh, well, wait, he really likes this drug, this drug, this drug, and we'll work you into that. Good, bad, or indifferent. It's just the way it goes. So I really encourage people to read the information about their medication. Go online and read the stuff. It might seem like it's French, but the more you read it, the more familiar you become with the words and you know what they mean. But this is work. Like, this is you.
I encourage people to own their own health. And what I'm hearing was you reached a point where you knew you had to own it. You were no longer just a passerby in your life. You had a doctor that you liked, but now was time for you to become a partner and to become knowledgeable so that you could have something to do with what was going on with your body. I
Most
commend
definitely.
you for that. That's what I really want everybody to learn to do.
I tell people all the time, I'm like, do not be afraid to call your doctor. Do not be afraid to have a different opinion. You know how you feel, and you just have to find words to articulate it, and you play with those words until they understand the word. Because the way they do emotion is what they're taught. It's written down. If somebody has this emotion, well, then they should show A, B, C, and D, and that's not always the way it works. So I was on the medication. I only started to come out of the haze that was the over-medicated person I had become. And I started asking questions like, okay, I have to be on this forever, but what are the long-term side effects? Am I going to have a doctor come to me in 5 years and say, oh, your liver's destroyed, or your kidneys aren't functioning? That is like my biggest fear. So I knew it was time to figure out how to keep me healthy while I knew I had to stay on these meds for life. And that's where I found IIN, where I went to school for nutrition. And it was kind of funny because going through it, they talk so much about health coaching. And I really didn't go in wanting to be a health coach. I wanted to go in to learn as much as I could about my body and how could I help it. Because I was experiencing side effects from medication. I think I spent like at least 5 years constipated. And before that, I was constipated.
It's very typical of medication, but people don't connect the dots that that's what's going on.
When I was a little girl, I was always constipated. And funny little story, looking back, I come to find out that when I was an infant, was first born, my mother was putting Caro syrup in my bottle to help me use the bathroom. And there's rumors that then she put beer in our bottles to make us sleep. So who's crazy there? So I didn't have a chance in hell when it came to the bowels. I was doomed.
Being constipated is also a sign of inflammation. So, and the gut is where your good feeling hormones are now produced. They used to think it was up here in the head, but they now know they're down in the gut. So if you were inflamed, you would have been constipated. And if the drugs were not doing anything with the inflammation, it wasn't helping the situation, it was exasperating it.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was. Always had constipation. So, where was I?
Sorry, I interrupted your train of thought.
I know. It's like, oh my goodness. So, I ended up staying here. Got on a really good medicated regimen with the doctor. Didn't have to go dance anymore. And slowly got healthier. So then I graduated from IIN, and they had what's called a dream book course after. My whole life, I wanted to write a book. But Cheryl, I didn't know what I wanted to write it about, what it would be about. And when this came up, I realized I hadn't lived my story yet. I hadn't lived the story that was needed for this book. And I wrote that book like I was just like flying on a plane. Okay, here we go. And as I did it, I became very raw. When you're digging deep, you're digging in stuff that you're not normally talking about. You don't normally explore. People medicate these emotions. That's why you often find people with mental health issues are on drugs or on alcohol. they're hiding these emotions. They don't know what to do with them. They don't even know what they are.
Yeah.
So,
The book would bring it all out because you're digging
yeah,
deep to tell your story.
yeah. And I dug deep. And the editor that I had, there was one chapter, and she's like, Brandi, I don't think you should put that in there. I don't think you should. And I kept my path, and I was like, oh, no, I'm keeping that. And then I think it's going to upset people. But it wasn't about upsetting people. For me, it was about giving people information that I needed when I got sick, what my family needed to know, what my family needed to understand, what I needed to understand. I didn't have that. No one told me. No one said, here's at least a pamphlet, right? I didn't even get a pamphlet. So I come to figure that topic in that chapter, and it was about child abuse, like physical child abuse, I think it triggered something in her. That's why she was so uncomfortable with that chapter being there. So I just let that be there. I didn't question her. I just do the rest. And it came out, and it did well. It was received well.
Tell us what the name of the book is, because it's a great name.
Oh, it's called From Ups and Downs to Middle Ground, Surviving Bipolar. And it's available on Amazon. And right now I actually have it on sale. I have the soft cover. It is $10. And the Kindle version is $5. And it'll probably stay like that till the end of May, which is Mental Health Month. But I have found the more I talk about it, I do a lot of Facebook Lives about it, people are like, oh, well, I could use that book, or I could use that information. And it's like,
There's a lot of people out there dealing with bipolar that don't know what to do and don't know where to go, and they haven't owned it yet. And at the point that you started to own it, and you had Andy who was giving you the loving support,
right.
That's when your life started to turn around.
Yeah, it totally turned around. I mean, I didn't know what life was going to be. Like, I never had plans for the future. I didn't figure at 45 I'd be doing this. At 50 I didn't think that far into the future, because I truly didn't think I was going to be alive. And then I was. And the book came out and did well, and family, as family do, they have the reactions they have. But I've been able to share that story, live groups, to podcasts and radio shows. And I always say, I'm an open book. Ask me anything.
And is it helping you to continually heal that you keep sharing your story?
I think for a little bit, it was very empowering. And then I felt during a certain period of time, I started to feel overwhelmed, because I felt like I was reliving it. Because when you stand up in front of people and you're telling your story, you kind of are reliving it. And I needed a break from reliving it. Like, I didn't mind helping in any way, if somebody wanted me to talk, yes, most definitely I would do it. But I stepped back just a little bit from actively pursuing, because I had to kind of finally realize, okay, what are these feelings I'm feeling? This is new for me. And is it okay? Is it something I can work through? And it became okay. I just had to realize that I don't have to relive it. I know it. And, people need to hear hope.
Absolutely.
People need to feel like they're understood.
That's one reason I want to do this series of interviews. People need hope. When they have something like you do, or they have an autoimmune disease that their doctor doesn't recognize, they need to find that ray of hope, that it doesn't have to be this way, that there are things that they can do that will bring them back to the person they want to be.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's hard.
Yeah, it is. And it's work.
Oh, it is. It's work. And then some people will even question your methods, or they'll question. And I learned quickly that those who question or have negative things to say, I'm like, you haven't dealt with your stuff, have you? I'm like, you've got a lot of inside junk, I said, that you haven't dealt with. Because now I can pick it out. I can pick it right up. I can tell by a conversation with someone just so fast, like, oh, you haven't dealt with your stuff, and I don't mean it in a negative way. I encourage it. I
Right.
said,
It's like me saying, own your own health. You want them
yeah,
to own their own stuff.
yeah, own it, go through it. It's not going to feel good at first. It feels
And
like
feel it.
crap.
What I'm hearing from you is not only own it, but feel it.
You
Don't be
have to
afraid to
feel it.
feel it.
And that's where the alcohol and drugs come in for so many people. They have these emotions that they don't know what they are. They don't know what to do with them. They don't know how to get them to go away. They drown them. And that just creates a whole nother problem. So my book did well. I was very happy. I was very pleased. I did speaking engagements and I got beautiful letters and emails. In return, it's just the way you touch people.
Right.
And, I always say, like, even on my Facebook profile, it says, ask me anything. Because when I wrote my book, I told myself, I said, okay, Brandi, you're going to write this, but you're not going to leave anything out. And if you have to leave certain things out, then you're not going to write it. Because I didn't want to have to write a second book to explain what was left out of the first. So I was detailed, I was graphic. If somebody read it, they would really understand the steps of bipolar. It's full of self-help techniques. It teaches you about doctors, how to communicate with doctors, what questions to ask them,
Fantastic.
how to communicate with them, understanding that your pharmacist can be your best friend. When you have an issue with medication, chemicals, like I go to a pharmacist first before I go to the doctor. Always, they have more education. It's just the way it works. I think physicians have one class in nutrition.
Yeah, it's half a day from what I understand. And what I didn't know is medical schools were set up by the pharmaceutical companies in the first place. So their main source of information is their pharmaceutical rep. So if their pharmaceutical rep doesn't deal with your kind of bipolar, they may not know that because they don't have a broad, and it takes 15 years for it to show up in their medical journals. Oh, that was sort of shocking to me, but that's why you must own your own health and have, do your own research and have robust conversations with your medical professionals because it's your body and they don't know anything about your body. They know what they do for a living. They want to help you. I do believe that. But it's your body and you have to be a partner in whatever happens.
I definitely agree with that. You see the pharmaceutical reps come in and they have this huge platter of danishes and pastries and stuff they bring to the doctor's office. It's like, are you really trying to bribe them? Really? To see you for 3 minutes? I've had the privilege to see several different pharmaceutical rep and doctor interactions. I just happened to be in the room. They are swift. They are quick. And then the doctor's left with some type of a pamphlet and says, okay, well, I'll try it on my patients and see how it goes. I'm like, really? That's all the information you have? That's it? And you're going to give it to people who are suffering? And I'm not coming back here. It's like, that's not where I'm going back to. And it's a blessing and a curse to have the information that we have. We know, but then you can get so much defiance from the outside.
Right.
But it's when you have to find that strength. And so after I did my book, I think I was already seeing my therapist. I do talk therapy every Thursday. Right now we do it on the phone. But I've kept her for so many years. And my mom's like, oh, well, maybe you need a new one. It's like, that's because you don't like what she's saying about you. Therapists get a bad rap. But I keep her because it's a good net under the wire for me. Something I really had to learn about triggers. We all experience triggers. Mm-hmm. And I always tell people a trigger is something that causes you to have a reaction or a change, whether it's physically or psychologically, emotionally. That is a trigger for you. We all have triggers. Or if it could be food for some people. It could trigger something else. So we all have triggers. We have to figure out what they are. So one, we can identify them. We can find out, well, why have they still been around for so long? What purpose are they serving? Sometimes they serve a purpose for a period of time. And then how do you, okay, this is a trigger. Well, how do I keep it from happening over and over and over again? How do I not let this person trigger me every time I talk to them? My mother's very, very difficult to deal with. She'll
And
say, oh,
obviously, she's been a trigger throughout your life.
my whole life. Yes, my whole life. She's been the biggest trigger. And when I really started to understand that and realize that I had to put boundaries down, my therapist also said, she said, Brandi, she goes, you have to mourn the loss of the mother that you think you should have had, or the mother that you wanted. I was like, what do you mean? I have to grieve it because it was a loss. It was tough. Like, that's the deep work. When I tell people you need to do the work to heal yourself, to live a happier life, it's that kinds of stuff. And it gets a hell of a lot harder before it gets better. But once I was able to establish boundaries, and for me, that meant not taking her phone call 5 times a day when she called. Like, I honestly used to talk to her every day, if not 2 times a day. And now I'm down to every 2 weeks. She totally noticed the shift, but I didn't elaborate because I don't have to. You know, this is me
to take care of you.
Yeah, I have to take care of me. And you know, and a person, if you live with a narcissist, and more people do than they realize, they aren't going to change and they're going to do the same things over and over and over again. So somebody had said, well, you just need to forgive her. You need to forgive her. And forgiving her, you know, my sister had sent me something, and forgiving isn't about the other person. Forgiving is about you.
Yeah, it's to heal you.
It's to heal you. Because I had it sideways for a while, and I was like, well, how do I keep forgiving her when she keeps doing the same things? How do I forgive her when she says and does and behaves the same way? I had to learn that the forgiveness, it wasn't about her. It was about me forgiving, me letting go of the anger and the hatred and the frustration and the expectations. The expectations we put on people are amazing.
Right, and
but
they
don't belong there.
They may not be able to meet those expectations.
No,
because they do the best they can. It just doesn't mean that it's right for you.
Right.
She's still your mother. I know you're still in contact with her. Obviously, you still love her.
Right.
But finding boundaries is what has allowed you to function in the world again. And the ability to find boundaries, I'm sure, has had something to do with having Andy, who's always there as a loving force to allow you to say no.
Yeah, because for the longest time, I wouldn't go visit anybody. I wouldn't. You know, I was still healing. I was still, you know, the brand new baby that's been reborn, figuring life out. So for the longest time, I didn't go, and they would blame him. But it's okay, because he stood there strong beside me when nobody else was.
Right.
You know, so to me, that is the most valuable relationship I've ever had, and still have, luckily. And other people, they do what they do. They do what they do. They do what they will. But if you're suffering with anything, you don't have to always suffer. You know, life isn't supposed to be painful. Our painful parts of our lives, that's where our lessons lie. Those are the things we're supposed to pick back, peel back the onions, and learn and take those lessons with you. Leave the onion peels behind.
I've learned that it's the tough times in my life and when I became the person that I became. It wasn't the easy times. It was all the tough ones, and figuring out why they were so painful that brought me out the other end and into a new phase to grow and learn from. So
Right.
you're right. And you owned it, which is what I love. I have a question.
I
You
do.
obviously are not 50 pounds overweight anymore. So
No.
what did you do in terms of nutrition and food that helped support your body and your mind that brought you back to this place of
I
even?
Yeah, I started juicing actually at one point because I was trying to heal the gut. So I was trying to get things moving. So I
Yep.
started juicing. So that was helpful. Um, and to be honest, I did Weight Watchers in 2009 and I lost 45 pounds. So Weight Watchers works. I'm not going to say it doesn't. It works. And then over the years, I noticed that when I have a rough time and I have to increase, medication, oh, well, the waistline likes to increase too. So then you have to work again to get that back off. You don't want to keep that weight on. It's just not healthy. But unfortunately, these medications make you crave carbohydrates. They make you crave sugar. They just feed off of it. And it's like, oh my God, sometimes it's a battle. It truly is a battle. And I tried all kinds of different supplements. Like I was supplement queen, just trying to get things moving along. And recently, probably about a month ago, when we knew all of this virus stuff was coming, he came to me and said, "I'm not trying to scare you." He said, "But this is big and it's coming." He said, "So we're going to start stocking up now." And I was thinking, oh, well, what about my meal replacement drinks? And what about this and that? He's like, you know what? He goes, Brandi, you don't need those. He said, give me a month. Because the last time I had to do medication, I put on a few more pounds. So I've been fighting with those. He said, give me a month. He's like, let me feed you and give you what you need so your body will let go. So in the morning, he brings me prune juice. I'm like I feel like I'm 5 again. Like that was the punishment drink.
Like that.
It's the punishment drink, I used to think. But honestly, I used to be able to drink a whole bottle and eat a container of prunes and be like, yeah, what else? Like, wouldn't phase me. So, and then I've been a coffee drinker forever, but I find myself not really enjoying coffee so much anymore. Like, taste buds are changing. And then, he brings me my breakfast. We have lunch and dinner, which before I wasn't eating enough. Like, you have to eat to lose weight.
Right. If you don't
I
eat it,
know this.
you hold on to it. Your body doesn't want to let a thing go.
No, not at all. And then in the evening, he juices pears and celery. And I'm regular. Like, but I'm not cramping regular. Sometimes I would just, hover over in pain with the constipation and the gas pains. But once again, he knows what he's doing. I just put it in his hands in that regard. So food and nutrition, what you're putting in really, really makes a difference.
Huge.
And it makes a huge difference. Sugar is really the enemy. Carbohydrates,
Eating all this way, has it evened out your emotions?
eating
You think
like
it's
this.
impacted it?
I was on an ADHD medication for adult attention deficit disorder, which my doctor was like, listen, you've had this since you were a child. He's like, you just found a way to manage. So we tried a medication and I have now been off of that drug for about a month. I have decreased my anti-anxiety medication, only take half of what I used to take. And the Seroquel, I still have an extra dosage that it's like a PRN, use as needed. So that's been really good. Anytime you get to take a medication off the shelf, it's like, oh wow, it's so exciting. It really is. And I did vitamins after vitamins and this after that, and you look at the ingredients and you're like, oh well, that's what I react to, and that's what I react to. And I really encourage people to read your ingredients. Just because somebody may say, oh, this is the best products, we have a whole entire health line. It's like, well, you really need to read all of the ingredients, one, to see if they're going to interact.
And look them up and know, are they synthetic? Are they natural? What are they? And how do they individually react in a
Right.
box.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of education. There's a lot of self-learning. But with Google, there's no excuse.
Right.
I truly believe it. Like if my mother tells me, oh, I don't know. I said, Mother, there's no excuse in the world to not know something. Google knows it all. Like I have a PhD in Google. Soon I'm going to have a, you know, it's the truth. But it's a resource that people, it's underutilized for that reason. So I feel like we have half of the population who are completely clueless, thinking whatever they think from wherever they got information. And then there's another half who actually researches and studies. And I find that those two clash.
And owns it.
Oh yeah, owns it. Yeah, owning it. I understand where it's hard because especially with bipolar, I mean, the behaviors, I mean, I could write a book alone on the crazy behaviors people have had while going through some type of a manic phase. A lot of times people are embarrassed at what they did, or what did I say to those people, or how did I end that relationship because I haven't talked to them in 5 years. I think that was my concern. I was like, people like from high school or like after high school, I'm like, I haven't spoken to them in 10 years. Like, do I really want to go back and revisit those relationships? And usually my answer is no. Like that to me is going backwards, where a lot of them have stayed where they are.
Right.
I have been around the world 5 times in healing and growing. And you know when you talk to people, how stuck they are, how willing they are to even try to get unstuck. Some people are willing, but you unfortunately have to get to a place where it just hurts so bad that you'll beg for anything. You just need someone to show you the way. And I tell people all the time on my Facebook lives, I'm like, I will take you by the hand and help you understand. And so many people have been like, oh, Brandi, you should charge people for all that. And you should make a course and you should charge people really, you know a lot. And people, I'm like, I know. To me, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right for me to charge money for me to share my story so it can help somebody. It's like, I'm not greedy. I'm not selfish. I feel like if I did that, I would just be putting more chains on them that hold them down. That now they're like, and most people who have mental health issues don't have huge incomes. They're struggling financially. So me personally, I don't know that I would ever get to that point. If charging to speak, to larger groups, sure. But that one-on-one, and people just have questions, just ask, I'll answer. I'll tell you whatever I can. And if I don't know it, I direct you. Look into this, look into there, call these people. They know more than I do. And I give that willingly. And other people may want to charge for it. And I see things, you see it all the time in Facebook and Instagram. This course, that course. I just like, just go through. Just keep scrolling on. I don't know. It's not for me.
Let me wind this down a little bit because we're out of time.
Okay.
Tell everybody how they can find you.
Okay. My website is down. I actually took it down for a reason. It wasn't serving. So I am in the process of putting up like a blog page. But the books can be found on Amazon.
Okay, good.
Brandi Blouch, Blouch. It's From Ups and Downs to Middle Ground, Surviving Bipolar. I have a big presence on Facebook, and it's my name. And Instagram. I spend lots of great information and stuff over Instagram. And that is under A Dose of Happiness with Brandi. So
Terrific.
you can find me there. You can drop questions. I put answers. So you can find me there.
And if you had just one thing to say to somebody who's bipolar, what would it be?
You won't always feel as bad as you do today.
Yeah.
When I heard those words, it changed everything for me.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are going to hear this. that are going to
Thank
buy
you.
because they got to listen to you today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to share with others.